Next curve.
Welcome, everyone, to this Next Curve reThink podcast episode where we break down the latest tech industry events and happenings into the insights that matter. I'm Leonard Lee, executive analyst at Next Curve. And in this Silicon Futures episode where we focus on all things related to semiconductors and the industry itself, we're going to be talking about the happenings in the month of March and April. So we're doing a little bit of a makeup here, and I am joined by my good friend and fellow industry analyst, Jim McGregor of the famed Tirias Research group. Do you have a group? You don't have a group at the end of your...
No.
Yeah, it's just Tirias Research. And so, Jim, how are you?
Good. How are you doing today?
It's been a while. We've been super busy, right?
Yes, it's been a very hectic year.
Yeah. And dare I say, it's still the beginning of the year?
No, it's almost the middle of the year.
Where's the time going? I know. It's really crazy. So, but before we start, please remember to like, share, react, and comment on this episode. Also, subscribe here on YouTube and Buzzsprout to listen to us on your favorite podcast platform. And also would like to remind everyone, opinions and statements made by my guests, in particular Jim in this instance and in this episode, are entirely his own and don't reflect mine or those of Next Curve. And we're doing this to provide an open forum for discussion and debate and everything else on all things related to consumer tech, commercial tech, and the semiconductor industry. So, Jim, so this installment, we're going to try to do a little bit of catch up, right? We didn't do our March bit. And unfortunately, Carl Freund, who's another partner in this endeavor that we have with this Silicon Futures podcast, isn't able to join us. But we're gonna hit on March and April, right?
Yes.
Okay.
That's a lot to hit on.
I know.
mean, March, I was gone the entire month of March. The entire month.
That's crazy. I'm proud to say that I managed to spend some time at home. So, but you're right.
We have a term for that. It's called lazy.
Yeah. Well, hey, Jensen Huang, come on. That's basically what we're saying, right?
Yes, make my people lazy.
That's the secret to success.
Exactly.
So, yeah. Speaking of March, we had, and Jensen Huang, we had GTC as well as MWC and Embedded World, right? And I know you've been chomping at the bit to talk about Embedded World because that was a really big event, but obviously something that really resonated with you this year.
Yes.
But, yeah. So I take it we're not going to talk too much about GTC, right? Because we already have a separate podcast on that. So folks,
quite honestly, I think we should talk about some of the most recent things that have happened. I mean, the Intel earnings, the shift of manufacturing by Apple to India. There's so much. I mean, the biggest thing to talk about right now is the tariff scramble.
Yeah,
that's the way I phrase it, because everyone's scrambling. Nobody knew how to really prepare for it. So everyone right now at this point is trying to figure out, how's it going to impact them from day to day, because it's changing every day, and how can they, expand their supply and manufacturing resources so that they can avoid the tariffs or limit the impact of the tariffs. Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, I think that and a lot of the geopolitical events that have transpired in the last 2 months it's pretty overwhelming, actually, right? And I think that is absolutely right, Jim. That's probably the most top of mind thing in the industry, and the sourcing, the security, resilience. All these topics are really coming into play, and we can definitely touch on that. So, did you want to expand on that right now, or do you want Do you want to?
I think it's a great place to start because, I mean, really, that is probably the most critical thing going in our industry right now is adjusting to this this trade war that has erupted over, the U.S. tariffs and not understanding really how things are going to. And, I've actually had this debate with some people and they're like, oh, well, it's going to be minimal because it's just this amount, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, no, it's not. Not when you start factoring in, you got, 25% tariffs coming into the U.S. on steel and aluminum. That impacts almost every industry that you have to talk about. You have rare earth materials, which are a huge leverage point that China has when they control 85% of the rare earth material manufacturing at this point in time, or processing, I should say. Now you can, and some people have said, okay, well, yeah, but there's plenty of rare earth materials in the US and other parts of the world, but it can take 3 to 5 or even 10 years to bring that to process. So it's going to be difficult. So, I mean, I think that the worst thing we have going on right now are those tariffs, and especially this battle between the U.S. and China. We've spent decades creating a global ecosystem and leveraging the expertise, the labor resources, the manufacturing capability, all the resources that go into building a very robust electronics industry, and now that's kind of being torn apart, and it's going to be very painful.
Yeah. And I think there's more going on here than just simply tariffs, right? You mentioned trade war, and you also mentioned the rare earths. And now we're also starting to see some movement on the services front. Quite honestly, I think it's very difficult for any company to really navigate what's happening right now because the level of volatility in terms of the policy, how it's being expressed, it's just, it flip-flops dramatically, literally day to day. So, obviously, not an easy situation for the industry at all.
Well, and I think the policymakers, and I'll leave it at that, are underestimating the impact. I mean, obviously you have it on the final product, you have it on the supply chain, you have it on legal environments. I mean, it could impact IP protections across borders. Sure. Now you even have it going out to consumers. We're already seeing this where Canadian consumers are trying to avoid any U.S. products. So, it goes from the heart of our industry all the way out to the consumer, and it's going to have a huge impact. And even as you mentioned, services, are companies willing to use a service if it's headquartered in the US or if it's headquartered in China, or even if they have offices in those countries? It's going to be a very difficult situation, and it's going to be a difficult regulatory situation to navigate. Once again, things changing day by day, but also the knowing that, there's likely to be other issues with technology transfers or IP sharing or, any type of interaction or transfer of data. So it's going to be a challenge. Going into 2025, I thought it was the most exciting time for our industry. Just the direction we were going with AI, and AI is still huge and still going millions of miles an hour. We have a whole new forecast for that, and it's blowing away anything that we did before. The demand is insatiable, but at the same token, where everything seemed to be moving in the same direction. I mean, think of the wireless industry. 5G was the first wireless technology where from day one, there was a single standard for the entire world. From day one. And we've had that going forward, and it's really propelling the industry. And now we're threatening to break all this effort apart over this trade battle, over these IP issues, over all these other political issues. The electronics industry, unfortunately, has become the pawn of the political world.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I'm glad that you brought up the whole topic of IP. And at the end of the day, what's really being, sort of threatened, if not compromised, in the process of being compromised is that level of global trust, right? You mentioned 5G. This is all based on trust. This is about literally industry and regulators as well as government supporting a standard. I'm not going to say open. It's more of a standard for technologies so that these technologies can scale. And so going forward, depending on how all these the tariff conversation and the trade relations play out and the tech relations play out, we might be looking at a very fragmented trust landscape. In fact, that's probably already in play right now. And so one of the big questions that I think not only the semiconductor industry has to ask itself, but the broader TMT, because we have to bring content in here as well, right? These are all industries that have benefited from this global standardization, markets in order to scale and deliver on sort of this ubiquitous benefit for consumers as well as enterprises, right? What happens when that all becomes dismantled? And I agree with you. This is something that policymakers around the globe need to contemplate and are starting to contemplate. It's just a very, very complex topic. And it's also something that's going to be very difficult to navigate, all the critical considerations because the landscape is shifting so quickly, right? But unfortunately, it looks like things are moving toward distrust versus trust. And as I think most people know, you can lose trust in a second, right? It takes years, if not generations, to build trust. And I think this is number one, a big risk for the industry because the dismantling of trust is something that is not trivial. And we may have to start thinking about, well, what is this trust landscape going to look like? Where is it moving toward? And how will new networks of trust be built? Because that's where you're going to see pockets of value, market opportunities. And so these TAMs that everyone is looking at are all of a sudden becoming very fragmented, and this is just going to be really tricky for the entire industry. And I don't think there is no solution at the moment, right? Everyone is just trying to figure out how they need to react or not react, or maybe take their time to examine what a sensible play might be in an otherwise super volatile situation.
Well, and you mentioned trust. That trust in the technology, that trust between technology providers, that trust of the consumer, all results from our industry working together holistically. Our industry has overcome issues with, obviously, with security, with safety, with everything else. I mean, think of the fact that we've never had a major disaster around a semiconductor fab. That's a huge accomplishment, especially when you some of the chemicals they use, like hydrofluoric acid. It is a huge accomplishment. So if there's one message, and I really, really hope that we get this podcast out to, government regulators around the world and say that, listen, our industry and innovation thrive when politics stays out of it.
Yeah.
And that is a key point. And granted, the electronics industry is so important to the political realm because it drives GDP, it drives growth, it drives innovation, and it will and it should. The best way you can do that is to support it, and to support it as a whole, and to support it through, incentives and everything else. But when you start putting restrictions on it, you really hamper everything that we do. And quite honestly, every government should learn their lesson by now that when you start hampering technology innovation, you really threaten the technology development in your own country.
Yeah, especially when you can argue that you're in a leadership position and you are somehow now succumbing to this notion that you're not. I mean, I think you're making a great point there because while TSMC might have leadership on the fab side, right, the manufacturing side of things, from a design perspective, systems and technology perspective, it's still the United States with all of the big brands that we all know so well that have amazing technology portfolios, but are also exhibiting product leadership and market leadership through leadership products, right? In general, I mean, I don't think we have to I mean, NVIDIA, perfect example, right? And so I think discounting these things can be really detrimental because as you start to look at what your policy needs to look like, you have to be cognizant of whatever leadership is in play at the moment. And I think a lot of this is also relevant to what's happened with 5G, right? And 6G, where we may not be, the policymakers may not be appreciating the importance of, number one, this technology because it's gone through a hype cycle. I say that it's been detrimentally disregarded, but China is definitely not easing on the throttle on mobile technologies, right? In fact, they're doubling down. And so they're looking at whatever kind of advantages that they can, lean into and maybe invest in and accelerate to have a competitive advantage going forward. And so, I agree with you. One of the things that has been a huge benefit for the industry is global competition.
Mm-hmm.
And
I'd call it co-opetition because it's cooperation and competition.
Right. You're right. And to the credit of many of the Chinese companies that have engaged over the years in this global electronics industry and its advancements, they have contributed. I mean, I think the myth is that they haven't. I think it's well documented that they have contributed and have been active participants in the advancement of the electronics industry as a whole, and also the semiconductor and AI sectors, if you will. So I think those are all important things to recognize as a policy maker. Otherwise, you can shoot yourself in the foot, right? And then also considering all the things that you mentioned earlier, Jim, about supply chain and the structure of the electronics industry as well as the semiconductor industry, which is a subset, being very, very clear on that so that, as you're looking at developing your policies, you're doing it in a thoughtful and strategic way, right? That helps you achieve whatever goal that you have, whether it's resiliency, supply chain resiliency, or national security, right? That all has to be thoughtful because at some point, if your industry and your industry champions have their market shrinking, right? That doesn't help advance any objective, I think, even national security, right?
Well, and a message to the industry itself. Vendors need to think globally, obviously, not just in terms of their customer base, but in terms of their engineering resources, their manufacturing and support resources. And I think a lot of the companies are. We've seen even some of those results over the past month. Obviously, Apple shifting U.S. smartphone manufacturing to India. That's a huge announcement. So, but also, TSMC introducing fabs in the U.S., planning on introducing fabs in Europe and in Japan in their future. So, I mean, I think that we're seeing that, and that's really an important thing. I think the next step a lot of these companies need to take is they need to think about expanding beyond their traditional markets. And we've seen some of this obviously in automotive. Automotive is a great example where the whole value chain is kind of thrown into disarray because now you have semiconductor providers not just providing chips, but providing the boards and complete system level solutions. And I think that's almost what we need, what a lot of companies need to think about, because, we don't know how all these trade tensions are going to play out, but it's really important that you think about not just where you play in the value chain, but where you can expand and enhance that value chain. NVIDIA is a great example. It went from being a chip company to a board company to a systems company to a software company to a services company. I mean, they pretty much provide the entire stack for AI solutions, from embedded applications like robotics all the way through, the data center for the high-end AI factory data centers. So I think it's really critical. And I think the last thing that these companies need to do, and I'll be honest with you, I don't think enough of them are thinking, even in the technology industry, are thinking enough about it. Not just how they can use AI, but how AI changes their business model.
Yeah.
And some companies are, and some companies, like I asked Jensen Halling this at GTC, I said, where do you see NVIDIA in 10 years? He's like, Jim, I wish I knew. That was a great answer because his business model is changing constantly around AI. He likes to say that they innovate at the speed of light, and they really are. And it's not just their products and services, but for the technology, it's also their business model. And I think a lot of technology companies, as well as other companies throughout other industries, need to think about how their business model changes. And I really think that globalization, that change in business model, and change in where you play in your industries is really going to drive a lot of change and hopefully overcome some of the issues we're seeing today with the political environment.
Yeah. And I might beg to differ a little bit. I generally agree with what you just said, Jim. But I also think that, companies like NVIDIA and others, have been kind of a victim of the hype as well. Now, I can appreciate the advancements that have happened with quote unquote AI, but more specifically, we need to be talking about generative AI and what's happening there. I think beyond some of the prototypical use cases and applications that it's being leveraged for, such as these chat bots like ChatGPT and some of the reasoning models that are now starting to come out, we're still in early days in terms of these technologies being mature. And I think one of the things that has kind of victimized the industry is the hype that, and sort of these misconceptions that somehow AI innovation is specifically tied to the number of GPUs or the kind of GPUs that you have access to. I think another big news item that came out this in the past 2 months was Huawei introducing their AI cloud matrix. I think it's like 384, right? Mm-hmm. Where it's an all optical system, right? No copper, apparently, and it can scale out larger than a Blackwell MVL 72, according to our friends at Semi Analysis that did a study on this. So, the thing is that, you could be chasing the wrong rabbit if you don't look at, you don't understand these things at a system level, but more importantly, understanding, well, where are we with this technology and what is it and what sort of impact is it really having? AI has always been difficult. It's always been costly. It's never been easy. And so some of these aspirational use cases and applications that everyone talks about are difficult to achieve, right? And so I think rather than the policymakers simply subscribing to, let's say, the fantasy and the fear of these technologies. There needs to be more of a grounded, strategic, as well as a tactical assessment of what they're looking at when it comes to quote unquote AI. And that needs to be unpacked very, very well. And it's not always the case that you're married to whatever buzzword is prevailing at a particular time. And the reason why I say that is because about a year and a half ago, there was all this talk about the GPU, right? And as you and I have talked about, and Carl have talked about on this show, it's no longer about the GPU or the chip. It's about the system, right? And we talked about the importance of interconnect and networking. This is something the Chinese, in particular Huawei, is very good at. And guess what? At a system level, they have been able to innovate and do some very interesting things on top of some very novel approaches to the actual AI software. That is not part of necessarily what we're seeing in the portfolio and the approaches that AI companies. I hate using that term, AI companies, but the AI ecosystem in the West is using, in particular, the United States, and so there's a lot to navigate here and a lot of complexities. And the funny thing is, you see a lot of policymakers still fixated on quote unquote the chip. You still see it, right?
And Jensen Huang probably made the most accurate statement that the new unit of compute is the data center. So that system you talk about isn't just the chip. It is everything that goes into it. It's even the power. It's the cooling. It's everything.
Cooling, yeah.
It is a giant server, if you will. And you're right. It is. And policymakers, I think, really can't understand the grasp of how quickly this technology is moving, all of the technology, and the demand that really exists out there for it. When we let the rabbit out of the box, it's not slowing. And you're right. Yeah. It's still immature. We're still not seeing the adoption at the enterprise level that I think we should have, but the consumer level, the pro user level, it's off the charts. We projected we just finished our forecast update. We projected a 19x increase from 2024 to 2024, or during 2024, in just token consumption. It was over 500x. Over 500x. And that's just tokens. That doesn't include the image and video creation, and not to mention the TCO, the cost of these systems and to run these systems and these solutions. Once again, I'm not going to these solutions. It's huge. It's massive. I mean, I heard a stat the other day that was talking about ChatGPT and saying just people saying thank you to ChatGPT is costing them millions because it's doing inference processing every time you type something in. Yeah. So, I mean, that is, and consumers and users are finding ways, very much like the internet, finding ways to use it and really driving that level of innovation, driving demand just through the roof. There is no stopping this. And I think anything that they do to get in the way is really going to hamper that.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's, but again, going back to the point I made earlier, the association of the GPU, okay, in very simplistic terms to somehow this idea that is the sole factor in influencing quote unquote AI leadership. Okay. And the reason why I bring this up in simple terms is because that's how most people think about these things, including policymakers, right? Mm-hmm. That is not good enough. I think that's really the point we're trying to make here, yep. Right? And like even, you're mentioning here of like the exponential growth of tokens. Well, yes, you're going to see that, especially as you see this transition toward reasoning models that are using long thinking. They're going to generate a lot more tokens because they're, theoretically thinking for a particular request. They're going to, this stuff doesn't come for free. It's not a one-shot inference that it's doing. It's inferencing for a very, very long time through this auto-regressive process. And that's also separate from compute. And that's the other thing that the folks at NVIDIA reminded us, right? Not every token is created equal. You're going, depending on the system that you have, you're going to be using either more or less compute for a token, depending on what sort of application you're running. So there's a lot of layers to peel back and understand, and that's one of the biggest challenges, I think, not only for policymakers but for the industry as well. Because to your point, this stuff is moving so quickly. There are folks in the industry that don't even really know where we are with things. You know what I'm saying? Other than maybe those leading edge folks who have esoteric knowledge about what's going on, who are some of the folks that we bump into and talk to all the time. But, that unpacking outside of that community, that small group of folks, is not a trivial task. And I think what I'm trying to do here is highlight, in particular to policymakers, the scale and the level of complexity of what they need to do to arrive at good policy, right? You do have to navigate through all this complexity and then synthesize things back to what are those key drivers that are going to shape your policy. And that's not easy. And so for anyone to sit there and say, hey, I understand this stuff and I can come up with a great policy based on these numbers that somebody's shown me or a couple of bullet points that someone's presented to me, I don't think that's enough. You have to be very, very thoughtful of this stuff.
I have the answer, and you can use a disclaimer on this one. We're talking about how you can use AI to make you more productive and or replace jobs. We use AI to replace the policymakers.
Well, that's what they're looking at doing in UAE, right?
Absolutely. Let's get rid of them altogether.
Yeah. What do they call that? It's a crypto concept. It's the DAO, right?
DAO.
What is it? Disaggregated something organization.
Yeah.
Yeah. All this stuff is kind of tied together in a weird way, though. I remember. No. Seriously, back in 2015, I forgot the name of that one company. This is one. Where was I? I was in Barcelona, and this is when blockchain was a really big deal, and all the crypto stuff was starting to go ballistic. I forgot the name of the company, but there was an AI humanoid, what do they call it? Animatronic doodad that
kind of a robot
was going crazy around.
Early robot.
But I recall the inventor mentioning that tokens were going to be the basis for AI, and so it's really interesting. I'll have to add that individual on the notes, but that was pretty good foresight on his part. So yeah, a lot of this stuff is kind of related, and there's no it shouldn't be really that much of a stretch to associate NVIDIA with a lot of these trends as well, because GPUs were I would say, or maybe even still used for crypto mining, right? Mm-hmm. So, and then you had the metaverse, and then now we have all this generative AI stuff. So,
no, now we have agentic AI.
Agentic. Okay, you and your agentic AI. So,
reasoning AI. Okay, let's call it reasoning AI.
I think that's more. Look, I got really confused at GTC in NVIDIA's use of agentic AI. I think it means something different for them than what you're hearing outside of GTC or the NVIDIA ecosphere.
Well, agentic AI should mean not only the ability to reason, but also the ability to make decisions.
Right. And then ideally actions. Right.
Yes.
Right. Because that, I think, is that action part is really where a lot of folks' heads are at with the agentic AI. Right.
Well, and that
you're closing the loop. You're trying to close the loop and have autonomous automation. I think the AI community, especially the one around NVIDIA, thinks of it more in terms of like the long thinking. I don't know. I mean,
it's also for physical AI. It's going to enable the autonomous machines. It's a critical step for especially humanoid robots, which we're seeing a huge amount of innovation in at this point in time. So, I mean, that's a key message here, is the fact that our industry is working together. Our industry is working effectively, and this trade war is just inhibiting innovation, and it's going to inhibit GDP. It's going to inhibit markets. It's going to inhibit consumers. It's a bad situation.
Yeah. But, Jim, I think we do have to recognize, when we do look at the geopolitics, where we do have conflicts going on around the world, national security is a legitimate concern, right? Mm-hmm. I think what you and I are trying to say is that just make sure that you don't shoot yourself in the foot, and that you don't buy into unintended consequences, which oftentimes happens if you don't go through that process that we outlined earlier, right? Where you're unpacking things to a degree that you should, and you're doing due diligence, but then you're also synthesizing that back down into key factors and drivers that should help you shape a good policy and a good strategy, right? As a policymaker.
The only way we can increase security, not just for us, but for everybody around the world, is through our industry. Our industry is the only one that can achieve that. And I think we've actually done a very good job of that. We still have hackers. We still have continued evolution of threats. And we're even entering the quantum era, where we're going to have new types of threats coming out. But, our industry has continued to increase in addressing or risen to address those threats as a whole. So I think I still think it should be a hands-off policy.
Okay. All right. I think it should be balanced. Maybe you'll agree, right? Hands-off is like, to me, I don't know if that's going to be something that when really subscribe to.
I know to walk away from a policymaker when they put a hyphen in semiconductor, or when they say silicone instead of silicon,
or silicon. Who would have known that there were so many ways of pronouncing silicon?
Yes.
Silicone or silicon.
Not silicone. Silicone is something different.
Something very, very different. Yes. Yes, that's absolutely true.
We need, hopefully our industry can influence the policymakers, but at the same time, our industry needs to react and understand that, things are going to change, and that globalization, that partnership is still very important to our industry.
Absolutely.
And cooperation and collaboration. So I really, truly hope that the 6G working group just started its efforts about 4 or 5 weeks ago.
Yeah.
So I would really hate to see that dissolve into regional conflicts.
But a lot of it could be just driven by leadership, technological leadership,
yes,
and actually market leadership. So when you look at all the different scenarios that you would use 5G Advanced for the market that is leveraging the technology and expressing the standardized technology in the most progressive way, I think is going to be the country that shapes what the next generation is going to look like, and whether or not the whole project starts to fragment and bifurcate. That's a different problem that has to be solved. But I think, as the GSMA and all these and 3GPP look forward, and even the ITU, how do you anticipate the fragmentation that may happen and reconstitute this commitment and understanding of the importance of the global standardization of technologies, right? I think that's going to be a big challenge going forward, because there's so many forces that are moving toward breaking everything apart, right? So, but hey, we got so serious. This is what happens when you talk about tariffs, and we're supposed to be a fun show, Jim.
Hey, this is the most critical topic in our industry today.
To get serious on us, right? Okay.
Yes.
All right. But I know that you were really excited and happy, okay, about something that you saw in Embedded World. So I'm going to give you an opportunity to talk about that really quick.
Actually, Embedded World, I thought is a great show. It really highlights the entire semiconductor ecosystem from top to bottom, and from the smallest embedded applications using a really small microcontroller all the way up to server-based type applications. There was a lot of innovation going on there. Obviously, AI was a huge topic, but even seeing companies like TI is getting back into microcontrollers and claims that they have the smallest microcontroller in the world.
Yeah.
AMD on the other end is introducing their Turion EPIC platform into their embedded segment only 6 months after they introduced it to the commercial server segment, and they plan on matching that in the future. So it's going to be not just for the standard servers or enterprise class servers or data center servers, but it's going to be available for embedded applications from day one, with the extended temperature ranges, with the extended life cycles and everything else. Really bringing, if you want to call it embedded, you want to call it IoT, whatever you want to call it, bring all this stuff up to being very, very important. A startup there in Atera had a quantum a neuromorphic processor.
Yeah.
Very impressive. It was capable of about a 40 parameter model in the size of about a microcontroller. Very, very small, very impressive. Just Synaptics, Microchip, Silicon Labs, on and on and on. Just the level of innovation we're seeing because of new technologies, in terms of semiconductor technology, in terms of chiplets, in terms of AI software, all these solutions. It's going to be fun to see, because we've talked about AI at the edge, and it's kind of been slowly moving there. But I got to tell you, man, it is reaching a fevered pace. And the level of innovation that's enabled both from the semiconductor technology and the software technology, especially in terms of AI, is really there now. And 2025 is going to be an exciting year. And we're going to see, it's kind of funny because we're trying to do our forecast for, what you need to do, AI processing and everything else. And let's face it, there are like 7 billion smartphones or handsets in use around the world today. Small fraction of them can, do on-device AI. But think about by 2030, you're going to have the vast majority of those devices, and not just those, but your other consumer devices, your PCs, your pretty much everything capable of doing AI. So, within the next 5 years, the level of innovation we're going to see in the plethora of electronics applications we have out there is going to be phenomenal. And, seeing the semiconductor ecosystem rise up to be able to support that is really incredible.
Yeah, that's cool. I like to remind the audience, or tell the audience if they don't know, that there's been a lot of effort, and investment going on in AI, or what they call edge AI these days. You might be familiar with a tiny ML, and the foundation. Now it's called Edge AI Foundation. This has been an area of development, R&D, and innovation for quite some time. And it's good to see that you're seeing a lot of progress.
Yes.
Because I think power efficient compute, scalable compute, meaning scaling down, and the model scaling down has been those have been the primary pursuits within that particular sector, the embedded sector. And I think what we're seeing with the work that's been happening in mobile as well as in the data center now, a lot of new possibilities for quote unquote broader edge computing. So I mean edge infrastructure, because you've mentioned what AMD is doing, but we also know what Qualcomm's doing there as well, in terms of bringing AI accelerators to edge infrastructure, but then also across all varieties of endpoint devices. And so, a lot of exciting stuff. And so it's good to hear that you're witnessing a lot of advancement and traction there.
And a lot of focus on the solution. Obviously, Qualcomm was very excited at Mobile World Congress about their acquisition of Edge Impulse. So bringing that expertise that Zach and his crew have from Edge Impulse into Qualcomm, really enabling a full solution, hardware, software solution for edge applications. That's going to be critical. And no, it is incredible. I think we still have a few hurdles in terms of compatibility. Everybody developing their own tools and not really creating standardized solutions out there in the market. But I think that's going to work its way out. And just the ability to use and leverage open source models is driving a lot of innovation. So,
my recommendation to the industry, ultimately, at the end of the day, middleware. Don't be afraid of it. It's just what it is. Don't wait for standards. They ironically can stymie innovation, application level innovation. It's like, if you need something to happen and you need things to talk to each other, middleware, systems integration, that is what happens. And, it's just a matter of how much it's going to cost. But if the solution is worth it, it'll work itself out, and the middleware as well as the integration work will pay for itself. But anyway,
I think we're seeing a lot of innovation in a lot of these IoT applications. We're seeing obviously innovation in consumer applications. We're seeing innovation in automotive. Unfortunately, it's all in China. I'm serious when I say that, unfortunately. That is sad to say that the US and the other Western countries are so far behind. We're seeing innovation, obviously, in not just what we're doing with AI in the data center, but the data center construction itself, going to more modular solutions, and anything from the racks to the power solutions to even portable data centers, where you can actually just have a portable building and just multiply buildings to create a data center. So we're seeing a lot of innovation across the industry, and it is an exciting time.
Yeah, I mean, Lenovo bringing their Neptune warm water cooling architectures and systems to edge appliances. I thought that was interesting.
Actually, there was also a company, and I'm going to have to go back and check the name, but it was at the Intel booth. It was one of the Intel partners at Mobile World Congress that was showing off a water-cooled RAN. So a pole-based radio access network that was fully water-cooled. I think the name, was it at the HPE booth? It was at the IBM booth, or the Intel booth. Sorry,
Intel booth. Right. Yeah, I bumped into a company 3 years ago that was doing that kind of stuff. But is it direct cooling, or is it like sort of that semi-immersive?
No, it was direct. It was two chip. It was, and it was. You don't think about it, but here's systems that have to sit out in the elements all the time, and they have to deal with the dust and everything else. Well, if you have liquid cooling, you can create a fully encapsulated, sealed environment. You don't worry about all those conditions. So it is amazing, the level of innovation that's going on in the industry, and we're seeing some of that innovation at the edge go up to the data center, and some of that innovation in the data center come down to the edge.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, you can see it happening, and that's that cross-pollination, I think, is a super interesting dynamic that we get to witness.
I think we should have embedded world and supercomputing at the same time.
I don't know. That might be too big of a conference. Right. So yeah, you know what? We might get a little bit of that, when we go to Taipei next
Computex,
month, right?
Yes.
Computex, because believe it or not, they have a pretty wide variety of stuff there.
Yes.
Including a lot of fans. Lots of fans.
Yeah, you seem to be a fan of fans. I've noticed.
I am a fan of fans. Yeah. So, okay, wonderful. So I think with that, we'll call it a wrap. Is that good?
I would just like to say that there's a lot of stuff coming up. We had TSMC's symposium this week. We're going to have Intel Direct Connect. So you got two major foundries talking about next generation semiconductor process technologies. TSMC was talking about their A14 process this week. We're going to have IBM Think next week. We're going to have Cadence Live coming up. We're going to have RSA, the security conference. We're going to have Computex. A lot of stuff going on in the industry, a lot of things coming up. So look for more of that from us together and individually. And, we developed a brand new AI data center inference forecast and TCO model that we're going to be introducing here the next couple of weeks.
There you go.
And we're going to be doing our best for everyone out there to cover this. I know we got a little serious on this one, but
I know, so serious.
We had to. If you know a regulator, please send this link to them and tell them to stop messing with our industry.
I mean, if anything, learn more about it and, be thoughtful. That's what I would say. But, definitely. I think they should engage with us. I think we're going to help policymakers quite a bit. With that, hey, Jim, real fun. I think we need to bring levity to our next episode, and hopefully we'll have Carl joining us. But geez,
well, we're going to be in Computex. A couple margaritas in, I'm sure we'll have a lot of levity to bring.
Yes, and Taipei is the perfect place to get a margarita.
Ironically, it is.
Okay, so a lot of exciting stuff coming up, folks. So make sure that you continue to tune into our podcast here. And so, remember to like, share, comment on this episode, subscribe to the reThink podcast here on YouTube and Buzzsprout, and take us on the road on your jog, and listen to us on your favorite podcast platform. And also check out Jim McGregor and the folks at Tirias Research, good partners of ours here at Next Curve, and follow them. I mean, Jim is one of, if not the leader, in the analyst community, and just a brilliant partner to have, but also a great friend and a tremendous resource for the industry. Okay,
you can go ahead and say it. Just say that Jim's the Uber geek.
You're a super nerd. Okay. Happy now? Okay. And then also subscribe to the Next Curve Research portal at www.next-curve for the tech and industry insights that matter. We'll see you next time.